and happy Easter. He is risen. My name's Natalie Jewell, and many of you already know me. My road to Christ is a long one, and to correctly appreciate it, we have to rewind the clock and start at the beginning. I was born in Venezuela to Lebanese parents who would struggle greatly in the next few years to cross the globe in search of a refuge from a ravaging civil war that gripped Lebanon for 15 years and is mirrored in the devastating images that we see splattered across the media of Syria today. My father spent almost a month with only $11 to his name and had to have 4 of his children and his wife sleep on a garage floor. To say that we were poor is an understatement. By the age of 3, I had hopped from Venezuela to Chicago, back to Venezuela, over to Lebanon, and ultimately settling in Southern California. 3 languages in 3 years did not do me well, and I struggled to speak by the age of 3, and not well at all. I remember standing for the Pledge of Allegiance in kindergarten, wondering what everybody was looking at, the flag or the alphabet, so I pretended to go along by alternating where I was looking at. I remember that was the beginning of my feeling alone. I never made friends like everybody else. I was different, and I was scared. My brothers were mean. My sister was a mean tomboy. My mother never spoke to us, and my sweet father had to work 7 days a week as an immigrant just to make ends meet. I was rarely allowed out, so I had no one. I had an abusive older brother who broke me to my core, and depression hit me hard. With no one to turn to, not even a single friend, I would lock myself in the restroom and cry out to God. It's odd, I remember back then actually knowing that the God that I was crying out to was different than the God inside of our house. We were Druze, the 3rd sect of Muslim. And it, like Judaism, is one that is of birth and not one that you can convert into. My family goes back thousands of years, and they believe that they're the chosen ones of God. I was desperate for a Prince Charming to come and save me. All I wanted was to feel wanted and loved. A friend wouldn't have hurt it either. I naively hoped to have found this when I married the first Druze guy that asked for my hand in marriage. I was 16. Now, I can't say that I had an arranged marriage, but being isolated, never allowed to speak to anyone or have phone calls or friends, a young Druze girl would see a husband as a chance to have friends, attention, and her only chance of a boyfriend. So I jumped on it. My poor father believed that I deserved better, not knowing that my mother had already told me I was getting old and made me feel like I was a burden. I thus married a man that I knew didn't love me, but I was determined to make him love me in time. Instead, he would spend the next 11 years tearing me down emotionally and physically. We went on to have 4 kids together and lived through a marriage full of rage, drug addiction, and adultery. One day I looked at myself in the mirror and said, I don't like you anymore, which was funny since I never did like me. But I could feel something whispering to me that it was time. So I grabbed all 4 kids and drove away that day, shocking my husband and the Druze world altogether. I spent my days crying, going to a therapist so I'd have someone to talk to since I had no friends, and feeling like a failure. About a year later, I remembered that as a kid it was my teachers who made me feel safe. I was one of the Americans who was brutally and physically bullied, and the teachers were my only refuge. They cared and lifted me up when I did well, and nowhere else in my life was that true. So I made the fateful decision to go back to school and become one myself. Today, my heart gravitates towards the bullied, depressed, and lonely child in my Sunday school classes for this very reason. School was a refreshing change. I felt alive. I was learning so much and making so many friends. Then one day, I found myself falling asleep during an evening math class. I was dying. I was a single mother of 4, taking classes from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. twice a week. And the teacher would turn off the light, blast the AC, and use one of those overhead projectors that use the plastic. Add to this his Ferris Bueller monotone voice, and I was gone. Just shoot me. So I walked over to my counselor's office and asked for an alternative, and God gave me one. 2 weeks into the semester, I was placed into a math class with a person who was upbeat and lively. His name was Brandon Moore. There was something nagging me, though. He never cursed, even outside of the classroom, and he mentioned his wife, Corey, in every class and was proud of being married. He spoke of his church and celebration of life parties that replaced funerals. It was a sweet and attractive alternative to the life I had. Happy, decent people. I wanted that. Now, as a side note, I had a friend who was taking me to Calvary Chapel Revival in Menifee, and I remember finding it strange that everyone was singing together, but I went along with it for the most part. I recall singing the words and skipping anything that said Jesus. After every service, I would ask my friend why they kept adding his name. Why couldn't they just say God? Back to the last day of the semester, when my math teacher asked me how I thought I was going to heaven. And I said, by being a good person. And in true Rancho Baptist form, he ran with that. When I got home, I wrote him an email, and it ended with, "We seem to believe in the same God, yet we don't." He took this and used it to show me the differences. And 2 weeks later, he invited me to church with his family. I went to the 8 a.m. service, and yes, it does exist, and was met by Matt, Lou, and Mary. I finally felt it. Home. I came to Christ 2 weeks later in Matt's office and came to know this church as my family and threw myself into service and into Bible studies. I brought my 4 kids along for the ride, and it's been a roller coaster inside and outside of church ever since. I could talk to you about the fallout from my family, from the backlash to the calling this church a cult, but that would take all day. And today is about Jesus and what he's done for us. Specifically for me, he's embraced me and loved me and has taken care of me. He waited and finally sent me a Prince Charming in the form of my wonderful husband and best friend, Daniel. Some of you know that his contact in my phone is my prince, and they make fun of it. But there's no doubt about that. The past 6 years has been proven to be trying with dangerous health problems with me, and he stood by my side like a hero. We have a similar and sadly parallel backgrounds and love each other with no end. And we have the joy of spending time together teaching the least of these in Sunday school about the love that God has for them, so they never grow up feeling like they're unloved and alone, so they know their worth in God's eyes. I look back at the person that I was and I cringe. I find that the Holy Spirit is changing me so much that I'm a different person every year. Life hasn't gotten easier since I came to Christ. If anything, it's gotten harder, and I feel like I fit in less with my extended family in the world. But at least I know that I have Christ there to reach down and pull me out of the waves, as he did Peter. I have 6 kids now, most of them teenagers, so the struggle is real. But I'm not alone, and God is there during our storms. As in my tumultuous life, God is working through the bad events in this world, and there might just be another Nataly Jewell in one of those refugee boats. I pray that we're all as brave as that one college professor and his family was with me, to show them that the love that Christ has for them, and the testimony that their ordeals will one day be. I'm just a daughter of a refugee immigrant who had horrible things happen to her so she can seek God. As I see it, my testimony no longer belongs to me, but to all of you who hear it. God bless our missionaries who are searching for the next testimony amongst the lost. God bless you, RBC. And once again, he is risen.